It started on an ordinary night when the world was quiet. The stars were bright and the air was cool over the wide desert. A small group of skywatchers had gathered outside a tiny observatory, a place most people didn't even know existed. They were not famous scientists or government workers. They were just curious people who liked to listen to the sky. One of them sat beside a radio dish that looked too old to still work. The dish pointed toward a patch of sky no one ever paid attention to. He adjusted the knobs again and again, hearing nothing but static. For hours the group sat in silence, sipping coffee, half asleep. Then, all of a sudden, the sound changed. It was a small pulse, like a heartbeat in the noise. Then another. Then another. At first, they thought it was interference from a satellite, or maybe some old airplane signal bouncing off the atmosphere. But the rhythm didn't match anything familiar. It was too clean, too steady, too planned. They recorded the data and kept listening. The signal repeated every few minutes, coming from deep space, far beyond the edges of our solar system. It wasn't the kind of sound nature made by accident. Something or someone was sending it. The next morning, they sent the recording to a few universities, not expecting much. Usually, such things ended with a quick answer. It's just background radiation, or it's a reflection from Earth. But this time, the experts couldn't explain it so easily. The pattern repeated everywhere. The same sound appeared on dishes in other countries, too. Within days, people across the world were talking about it. News channels ran the story under different names. The cosmic beat, the signal from the stars, the pulse from nowhere. Most people didn't believe it was real at first. But when observatories in 3 different continents confirmed the same pattern, everyone began to listen. In the following weeks, the signal grew stronger. It wasn't just a random beat anymore. Scientists noticed small variations hidden inside like coded numbers. A few mathematicians said it looked like prime numbers being sent in order, a method often imagined in science fiction as the universal sign of intelligence. That one discovery changed everything. The governments got involved fast. Suddenly, the same group of quiet skywatchers who had discovered the signal found their desert site surrounded by reporters, trucks, and security people. Someone high up in authority took control of their data. The simple team that once listened to the stars now watched their discovery taken away by professionals. But even they didn't mind. They knew this wasn't about fame. This was something bigger, maybe the biggest thing humanity had ever faced. Across the world, ordinary people started to talk about what it could mean. Some were excited, saying this was proof that we were not alone. Others were scared, warning that we might be calling something dangerous. Religions and scientists argued on live television. Some called it a blessing, others a test. The internet filled with wild theories, from lost civilizations to secret alien messages. While the noise of the world grew louder, in one quiet government facility, a small team of experts worked day and night. They didn't care about the news. They cared about the truth hidden inside that pulse. They filtered, cleaned, and re-examined every tiny sound, every echo, every repeat. Slowly, they began to see a pattern. What looked like just a sound at first turned into a message of numbers. The team realized it wasn't random at all. It had structure. The message described something like coordinates pointing to a region far beyond any known planet. And buried deeper in the signal was a second layer. It wasn't just coordinates. It was data, maybe even a story. At first, no one wanted to believe it. But as the decoding continued, something became clear. Whoever sent the message was asking for help. The realization spread quietly among the top scientists before reaching the media. People couldn't believe it. A plea for help from space? How could that be possible? What kind of beings could reach across light years just to ask strangers for aid? When the message was translated into a visual form, it showed faint images made from simple mathematical patterns. The shapes looked like planets and energy lines, like diagrams of a dying world. The message didn't say who they were or what happened, only that their world was failing. Radiation, hunger, silence. The kind of silence that comes after a civilization falls apart. Humanity stood at a crossroads. Some believed it was a trick. Others said it was our chance to do something that mattered beyond our own small world. The United Nations called special meetings. Space agencies held conferences that lasted days. In homes, schools, and workplaces, everyone was talking about it. The idea that someone out there was desperate enough to call across the stars touched something deep in people. Even those who didn't believe in aliens couldn't ignore the feeling, the mix of fear and hope that spread everywhere. Meanwhile, the group who had first found the signal watched all this unfold from the sidelines. They had never meant for things to go this far. They had only wanted to understand the universe a little better. Yet their small discovery had shaken the world. Weeks passed. Scientists built models and ran simulations to trace where the signal came from. It wasn't from our galaxy's center, nor from any known star system nearby. It came from a lonely region of space, so far that even the nearest light would take thousands of years to reach it. That made no sense, unless the sender was far more advanced than anything humans had imagined. In the middle of all this, a question began to form that no one could answer. Should we reply? If someone was calling for help, could Earth really ignore it? What if they were friendly? What if they had once been like us, curious, hopeful, and afraid? But what if answering brought danger instead? What if others, less kind, were also listening? People remembered old warnings from science fiction, the stories that said don't answer the call. Some scientists argued that Earth was too young, too fragile to risk contact. But others said that staying silent would be even worse. Humanity had always looked to the stars searching for meaning. Now the stars were calling back. While the world debated, the signal changed again. The steady rhythm became weaker, as if fading away. The once clear message began to distort. Some said it was because their world was truly dying, that whoever sent it might not have much time left. In one quiet meeting, a scientist looked at the decaying pattern and whispered, "They're running out of power." No one responded, but everyone felt the same cold truth. If this was real, their plea might soon disappear forever. Across the planet, ordinary people began leaving messages online, simple ones. "We hear you. Hold on. We're trying to understand." It was touching and strange at the same time, like people talking to ghosts across the void. That night, in many cities, people looked up. Some with fear, some with wonder. For the first time in human history, the whole world shared one single thought: we are not alone. But what no one on Earth knew was that this message, this small cry from a distant world, was never meant for them. The beings who sent it had no idea what kind of planet Earth really was. A world of storms, volcanoes, and living creatures that learned to survive everything the universe threw at them. They didn't know that Earth was called, by some other civilizations, the Deathworld, a place where life itself fought tooth and nail just to keep breathing. A world that produced beings tough enough to adapt, evolve, and rise no matter the challenge. And so, as the signal faded into the background of space, the decision still hung in the air. Would humanity answer? Somewhere in that desert observatory, one of the sky watchers turned off his equipment and stared at the sky again. He felt both small and powerful at the same time. Small because he knew how vast the universe was. Powerful because he realized Earth had just been noticed. He didn't know what would come next, and none of them did. But deep inside, he felt something that words couldn't describe. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was a strange, quiet excitement, like standing at the edge of something huge, something that could change everything humans thought they knew. Maybe they would answer. Maybe they wouldn't. But one thing was sure: whoever had sent that signal would never be forgotten. Because now, for the first time, the Deathworlders of Earth were listening. For days after the strange signal was heard, the world couldn't stop talking about it. People gathered around television screens, radios, and phones, waiting for new updates. Scientists who once worked quietly in labs were now facing microphones and cameras. Everyone wanted to know the same thing: who sent the message and what did it really say? The first group of experts tried to decode it using mathematical models. They found repeating numbers and patterns that couldn't be random. It was like someone out there was trying to speak a universal language, one that didn't need words, only logic. Numbers, after all, were the same everywhere. 1 + 1 was always 2, even at the edge of the galaxy. But soon it became clear that there was more to the signal. The tone and rhythm changed slightly every few hours, as if it were reacting to something or trying harder to be understood. Every little change carried new data, new symbols, and more confusion. Then one evening, the pattern shifted again. The message turned into what looked like a map. Coordinates spread across a dark section of the sky. It pointed to a region no telescope had ever found anything interesting in. A silent corner of space. The scientists checked again and again, but the coordinates stayed the same. One linguist, an older woman known for her calm way of thinking, studied the signal for days. She believed that behind the numbers was a second layer, something emotional, something more than data. When she filtered the message differently, she found short bursts of tone that resembled repeating phrases. They weren't words, but they felt deliberate, like a voice breaking through static. Her conclusion stunned everyone. The message wasn't just information, it was a call for help. At first, nobody wanted to believe her. Governments didn't want panic, and scientists didn't want to look foolish. But when more labs confirmed her findings, the truth could no longer be hidden. Somewhere out there, far beyond the stars, another civilization was crying out. They weren't reaching out to make contact or trade knowledge. They were simply asking for help. Once the news broke, everything changed again. The idea that someone needed help from another world touched people deeply. For the first time, humans saw space not as a mystery to explore, but as a place where life, fragile, desperate life, could exist beyond their reach. Some people cried when they heard the translation. Others refused to believe it. A few called it a trick or a trap, but most simply looked up at the sky with a quiet sense of sadness and wonder. What kind of world would send such a message? What had gone so wrong that they would cry into the void, not even knowing if anyone could hear? The linguist and her team continued decoding. They began to uncover fragments that told more about the senders, pictures made from mathematical grids like early digital images. When arranged, the shapes showed the outline of a planet surrounded by strange patterns like spirals and clouds. There were darker zones too, marks that looked like destruction, as if parts of their world were burned or broken. The more they decoded, the more they saw. The alien world was old, filled with technology that looked far ahead of Earth's. They had cities, energy networks, and complex machines. But everything was collapsing. Something, maybe radiation, maybe war, maybe something worse, was slowly destroying their home. The message showed urgency. It wasn't just help us, it was we can't survive much longer. That one phrase made humanity pause. For all our progress, Earth had always seen itself as the center of existence. Now suddenly it wasn't. Somewhere far away, another intelligent life form was dying, calling out into the dark, and somehow that message had reached us. The world leaders met behind closed doors. They argued about whether to respond. Some said it was too risky, that if this species was truly advanced, they might bring danger. Others said ignoring them would be cruel. The debate turned political. Countries accused one another of hiding secret information or trying to use the signal for their own benefit. Outside those rooms, the rest of the world waited. On social media, people wrote prayers and poems for the unseen beings. In classrooms, teachers spoke to children about what it meant to be human, that even across light years, compassion could still matter. Meanwhile, a new team was assembled, one that would work quietly, away from the media and politics. It included astronomers, engineers, mathematicians, and translators. Their job was to study the signal completely and decide if Earth could respond. They called their secret effort Project Echo. They worked in silence for months, hidden inside a large underground lab. Using every satellite, radio telescope, and computing system available, they broke down the message layer by layer. The more they studied, the more they realized the message was meant to be understood, as if the senders had prepared it carefully, hoping that whoever heard it would one day figure it out. But what surprised them most wasn't the message's clarity. It was the fact that it was directed toward a specific region of the galaxy, the area Earth belonged to. That could only mean one thing. Whoever sent it knew life existed here. It was terrifying and fascinating at the same time. How long had they been watching? How did they even know about us? Despite the fear, the scientists pressed on. They began forming a response. Not a full message, but a test pattern. A simple reply that would show the signal had been received. They spent weeks designing it carefully so that it wouldn't reveal too much about Earth. When the response was ready, they hesitated. No one wanted to be responsible for the first word humanity ever said to another species. Some argued it wasn't their place to speak for the planet, but deep inside everyone knew they couldn't stay silent forever. The day came quietly. No speeches, no crowds. Just a few tired scientists sitting before a console, watching the countdown to transmission. When the signal was sent, it carried only one simple pattern, a mirror of the alien message, slightly altered to show understanding. After sending it, they waited. Hours passed, Then days, then weeks. Nothing came back. Outside, life continued as normal. The news stopped talking about it, and the world slowly turned its attention back to everyday problems. Some said the aliens had never existed. Others said maybe the message had been a mistake. But the people in Project Echo didn't stop listening. Then one night the signal returned. It came suddenly, stronger and faster than before. This time the pattern was different, it was more complex, filled with new data. The rhythm of the signal almost sounded emotional, like relief, as if whoever sent it was happy to be heard. The linguist listened to the playback and whispered, "They understood us." But mixed with that relief was something new, a warning. The data showed strange movements near their planet, energy bursts that didn't look natural. They seemed afraid of something coming toward them. The message ended with a final phrase, repeated over and over. It took days to translate, but when it was done, it made everyone in the room silent. The message said, "We did not expect Deathworlders to answer." No one in the room knew what the word Deathworlders meant. Some thought it was a translation error. Others thought it was their word for danger, or maybe a name for their enemies. But as scientists studied it more, they realized it wasn't an insult. It was a description, a fact about Earth. Across interstellar records, planets like ours were rare. Worlds full of violent storms, deadly climates, and countless predators. Places where survival was almost impossible. To outsiders, Earth would seem terrifying. A planet that produced life strong enough to endure everything. The aliens hadn't expected such a world to answer their call. They had reached out for help, never realizing that the planet listening to them was considered one of the most dangerous in the galaxy. The scientists didn't know whether to feel proud or afraid. They had wanted to show kindness, but now they wondered what the aliens really thought of them. Still, the message was clear. They were in danger, and they had trusted Earth to hear them, and now, Earth had to decide what to do next. Would humans take the risk and help, knowing nothing about who these beings were, or would they step back, afraid of what might come? The world held its breath again, waiting for a decision. Somewhere in that quiet underground lab, the scientists stared at the blinking lights of the receiver. The signal from another world still echoed faintly in the speakers, fading in and out like a whisper. The linguist looked at the sky on her way out and thought about the words that had started it all. "We need help." She didn't know who they were, or what they looked like, but one thing was certain. They were real, and now humanity had a choice, to stay silent or to speak once more. Whatever they decided, one truth would never change. The moment Earth replied, everything about being human changed forever. The world had gone quiet again. The excitement that once filled every news channel now felt like a fading echo. People had stopped asking about the signal, thinking it was just another mystery that would never be solved. But deep underground, far from cameras and crowds, a small group of people still listened. Project Echo had never stopped. Every night, their large antennas turned toward the same patch of sky, searching for another reply. The last message from the unknown beings had ended with those strange words, "We did not expect Deathworlders to answer." No one could fully understand what that meant, but it carried a strange weight. The people working in the lab couldn't forget it. One of the engineers would sometimes joke, "Maybe they think we're dangerous." But even he said it nervously, as if afraid that might be true. The team's leaders had decided to keep listening in secret. They knew if the world found out there was more contact, panic might return. For months, they picked up nothing but silence. Then one afternoon, a faint pulse returned. It was weak, but it was there. The same rhythm, the same voice across the stars. The scientists leaned closer, adjusting dials, cleaning the noise. When the signal cleared, new data appeared. It wasn't a distress call this time. It was something new. A question. The aliens were asking who had answered. For a long time, the team didn't know how to respond. How could they explain what humans were? A mix of kindness and chaos, hope and fear, peace and conflict, to beings that might never understand Earth's ways. After long meetings, arguments, and endless drafts, they finally built a message they thought was simple enough, a sequence of images made from light and sound. The message showed Earth's shape, its atmosphere, its oceans and mountains. It showed animals, plants, and the simple structure of human DNA. It didn't include weapons or wars, only peaceful signs of life. The final image was of a human hand raised, not in greeting or threat, but as a universal gesture of awareness. A silent way of saying, "We see you." It took weeks to prepare. Every signal had to be calculated perfectly. Finally, the moment came. In a quiet control room surrounded by humming machines, they sent the response, a beam of coded light speeding through space toward the same coordinates. Then, all they could do was wait. For 3 months, nothing happened. Life on Earth went on as usual. The world above didn't know what was being decided deep underground, a silent conversation between two worlds. Then one night, the signal came back. But this time it wasn't a single tone. It was hundreds of overlapping waves like voices layered on top of each other. The team quickly worked to separate the sounds, filtering them one by one until a clear structure appeared. It was music, not like human music with rhythm or melody, but a pattern of rising and falling frequencies that felt alive. It was beautiful, strange, and filled with emotion. Some thought it was their way of saying thank you. Others believed it was their language, not made of words, but of energy and feeling. As the scientists studied it, they found something hidden deep in the sound. A map, this time far more detailed. It showed a specific location beyond the solar system, close enough that human instruments could one day reach it. Along with the map came a message, "We are coming." That line changed everything. The people in Project Echo froze. Were the beings planning to visit? Could they travel so far? What would they do when they arrived? Governments were informed quietly. Meetings began in secret rooms again, this time with more fear than curiosity. The leaders didn't know whether to prepare a welcome or build defenses. Some wanted to send a warning, others said it was too late. If they could cross the stars, Earth had no way to stop them. But the scientists felt something different. They believed the message wasn't a threat. The music, the emotion in the tones, and it didn't sound like conquest. It sounded like relief. Maybe they were coming not to rule, but to reach the only world that had answered their cry. As the months passed, telescopes detected strange movement near the outer edges of the solar system. Something large but slow, approaching carefully. The object didn't send any threat signals or weapons. It moved quietly, like a traveler who didn't want to disturb what it was visiting. People began to notice when the news leaked. At first, the world didn't believe it. But when amateur astronomers started showing images, a strange reflection near Saturn's orbit, disbelief turned into panic and wonder again. Some prayed, some protested, some built shelters afraid of invasion. But the object stopped near the moon, hovering in silent orbit. It didn't land, it didn't attack. It just stayed there, turning slowly, shining faintly under the sunlight. For weeks, the world waited. No one slept peacefully. Every channel showed the same image, a glowing shape near the moon, not a star, not a rock, but something made, something alive. Then came the signal. It wasn't broadcast to one country or government. It was transmitted to every major radio and satellite frequency at once. A single voice, and not human but clear and soft, filled the air. It wasn't in any language people understood, but within hours, artificial translators and linguists worked together to decode it. The translation was simple. "We heard your voice. We thank the world that answered." The entire planet went silent. No one could believe what they were hearing. For the first time in history, two intelligent species had spoken to each other. Not through science fiction, not through fantasy, but in reality. The message continued. The beings introduced themselves as the Arathan. They spoke of a world far from any star we could see. A world that had once been green and full of life but was now dying. They said their home had fallen to disaster long ago, and they had searched across galaxies for help. Their message was not full of pride or power. It was filled with pain, gratitude, and something close to fear. They described their journey through cold, empty space, how they had lost many of their kind, and how they never expected anyone to answer their last signal. Then they said something that caught everyone's attention. "We thought your world was silent. We thought no one from the Deathworld would speak." That word again, Deathworld. It appeared over and over. Translators and scientists worked day and night to understand its meaning. Slowly, they realized what the Arathan were trying to say. In the records of ancient space civilizations, some planets had been marked as extremely dangerous. Worlds full of harsh weather, violent nature, and unpredictable species. Those worlds were called Deathworlds, places where survival was nearly impossible. Earth, as it turned out, was one of them. To the Arathan, humanity was a mystery, a race that had grown strong in chaos, learned to adapt to disaster, and still created beauty, music, and hope. They couldn't understand how humans had survived for so long. Their message sounded both thankful and cautious. They had reached out for help, but they didn't expect that the help would come from a world like ours, a world that looked peaceful from far away, but had been built on struggle. As the messages continued, the Arathan shared more. They sent data about their dying world, maps, images, and small recordings. Their planet was crumbling, covered in radiation storms and endless night. They had no safe place left to live. Their only chance was to find another world, and Earth had been their last hope. People across the world were divided. Some said humanity should help, that it was a moral duty to save another species. Others warned against trusting them, fearing a trap. The internet exploded with theories, some hopeful, some fearful. But among the noise, a quiet truth began to spread. If the Arathan had come all this way just to find peace, maybe they weren't so different from us after all. Over the next few weeks, the Arathan's craft slowly moved closer to Earth. Not close enough to enter the atmosphere, but near enough that telescopes could see its surface, smooth silver and glowing faintly blue. It seemed alive, like it was breathing. Then, for the first time, they sent a visual message. On every major screen, a soft, shifting light formed the image of a tall, thin being with calm eyes that looked almost human, though their skin shimmered like metal and glass. The being spoke with a gentle tone, translated instantly by machines. "We come in peace. We ask to share knowledge, not to take. We wish to live." It was simple, honest. And in that moment, something inside people changed. The fear started to fade. For once, humanity didn't see itself as alone or superior. They saw a reflection of themselves, a species trying to survive, trying to find hope in the dark. Leaders from every part of the world met to decide what to do next. Some wanted to send supplies. Others suggested offering a part of Earth where the Arathan could stay. Scientists proposed learning from them, their technology, their history, their mistakes. But as humanity prepared for contact, no one could shake the strange feeling that there was more to this story. The Arathan's tone sometimes carried sadness deeper than words could show. It felt like they were hiding something, not from malice, but from fear. Still, the first step had been taken. 2 worlds had spoken. 2 species had found each other in the endless dark, and though neither side fully understood what would come next, one thing was certain: the universe would never be the same again. The day the world saw the Arathan ship with their own eyes, everything changed. People filled the streets, staring up at the sky. News channels from every country showed the same image: a bright object above the clouds, large and silent, moving gently across the atmosphere. It didn't look like anything built by humans. It was smooth, silver, and almost alive, as if the metal itself was breathing. For hours it just floated there. No sound, no lights, no movement. The whole planet waited for something to happen. In government centers, people sat in rooms filled with screens and blinking signals. They were ready for any kind of contact, but no one wanted to be the first to make a mistake. The Arathan had said they came in peace, yet no one truly knew what they wanted. Everyone had questions, but no one had answers. The scientists from Project Echo were allowed back into the communication program. After all, they were the ones who had spoken to the Arathan first. They worked day and night, monitoring every signal coming from the ship. Most of the time, the readings showed nothing unusual. But then one morning, a new transmission arrived, short, soft, and clear. It wasn't just sound this time. It was an image. A figure appeared on the screens, tall, thin, and calm. Its skin looked like liquid glass, shining faintly. Its eyes were deep and full of light, almost human in shape, but far older, wiser. The voice that came through was translated instantly into human language by the same machines that had decoded their earlier messages. The being spoke slowly, carefully, as if every word mattered. "We come from a home that no longer breathes," it said. "We ask for a place to rest. We do not wish to rule or harm. We only wish to live." People across the planet watched that message. For a moment, there was silence everywhere. No traffic, no talking, just people listening. The words were simple, but they carried a deep sadness. Even those who didn't believe in aliens felt something in their hearts. The Arathan didn't sound like conquerors. They sounded tired. World leaders met again. Some wanted to welcome them. Others said it was too dangerous. But in the end, the decision was made to open contact. Cautiously and with care, a team of scientists and astronauts was chosen to approach the Arathan ship. The plan was simple: to meet them through a controlled connection, not face-to-face, but through a floating platform sent close to their vessel. When the time came, the world watched live. A small craft left Earth and drifted toward the shining ship. Everyone held their breath. The moment it got close, a beam of soft blue light surrounded it. The instruments on board stopped working, but the crew remained unharmed. Through the cameras, they could see the Arathan ship opening slowly, revealing a vast inner space filled with misty light. Inside, shadows moved. The Arathan were real. They were fragile-looking beings, taller than humans but thinner, their bodies glowing faintly from within. They moved slowly, carefully, as if gravity felt different for them. When they spoke, their voices didn't come from their mouths. It was like their thoughts were being transmitted directly into sound. The leader of the human team spoke softly through the microphone. "We welcome you," she said. "You're safe here." The Arathan looked at the camera for a long time before responding. "We did not expect safety," they said. "We have never known it." Those words reached every corner of the Earth. Even people who didn't care about space before now felt something change inside them. For centuries, humans had dreamed about life beyond their planet. Now, standing before them were travelers who had survived the impossible, crossing endless space just to find hope. Over the next few days, the Arathan began to share their story. They spoke of their home world, a place once beautiful and full of oceans and light. But over time, their sun had grown unstable, burning their skies and poisoning the air. They tried to move underground, then to space, but their technology failed them. Most of their people were gone. The few who survived built great ships and set out in different directions, hoping one of them would find a world where life still thrived. Only one ship had made it this far. Earth was the first planet that had ever answered. People listened with both awe and sorrow. The Arathan didn't ask for food, power, or land. They asked for time, a place where they could rest and rebuild, but not everyone trusted them. Some argued that letting them stay could be dangerous. "We don't know their true power," they said. "They could be hiding weapons or something worse." Others replied, "If they meant harm, they would have done it already." The arguments went on, but the Arathan remained patient. They waited quietly above the Earth, sending peaceful signals and observing human life. They watched our cities, our oceans, and our storms. One day they sent a message that puzzled everyone. "You live on a world of chaos," they said, "and yet you smile. You fight storms and still sing. You live among danger, but you call it home. You are not like any beings we have known." That message spread like wildfire. For the first time, humans began to see themselves through another species' eyes. The Arathan saw us as strange creatures who thrived in hardship. To them, Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a world that had shaped beings tough enough to survive anything. That's when the scientists realized why the Arathan had called Earth a death world. To them, our home was terrifying. Storms, earthquakes, volcanoes, diseases, predators, and yet somehow life continued here. They couldn't imagine living in such a place, let alone evolving in it. But what truly amazed them was that humanity, despite living in danger, still cared, still helped, still reached out across the stars. Weeks passed, and communication between the two species became more natural. The Arathan learned to understand human emotions, kindness, sadness, humor. They even began using our words when they spoke. "Hope," they said once, was a word their language never had. As trust grew, the Arathan ship lowered slightly, coming closer to Earth's orbit. For the first time, small groups of humans were allowed to visit. The visitors described the ship as quiet and full of light, almost like walking inside a dream. The Arathan treated them gently, curious about everything they said or did. But even in this new friendship, something seemed hidden. The Arathan often paused mid-conversation, their glowing eyes turning distant as if they were listening to something far away. Sometimes they whispered about the darkness behind us and the ones who follow. When asked what that meant, they would only say, It is why we fled. The scientists began to worry. Was something chasing them? Had they brought danger with them? But the Arathan never explained further. They always changed the subject, saying only, "Your world is strong. It will not fall easily." Their words left people uneasy. Still, humanity continued to learn from them. The Arathan shared knowledge about energy, medicine, and communication. They helped repair satellites and clean parts of the upper atmosphere using their strange technology. In return, humans shared art, music, and stories. The Arathan were fascinated by human emotions, especially laughter. One of them once said, "You laugh even when the world hurts." We do not know how to do that. It made people realize that, for all their wisdom and technology, the Arathan were missing something deeply human. Months later, the Arathan sent a final message to every major city at once. The translation said, "We thank your world, but the darkness that destroyed ours has found us again. It moves faster than light, and it knows we are here." Panic spread instantly. Scientists rushed to analyze what the message meant. Was it a warning? Was another alien race approaching? The Arathan ship began to glow brighter, its outer shell shifting like it was preparing for something. The leaders of Earth tried to contact them, but the Arathan's replies grew shorter, weaker. "Do not fear," they said softly. "We will protect you as long as we can." And then, one night, the lights on their ship went dark. Telescopes showed nothing but silence. The ship was still there, but it wasn't moving anymore. No one knew what had happened. Some believed the Arathan had shut down their systems to hide. Others feared something terrible was coming from space, something they hadn't told us about. In the days that followed, scientists worked non-stop, trying to re-establish contact. People around the world prayed or stared at the night sky, wondering if the friendship between two worlds had ended before it truly began. But deep inside, everyone knew this was not the end. The Arathan had come for a reason, and they had left a warning. Something was out there, something that had destroyed their world. And now it was coming toward Earth. Yet even as fear began to grow again, there was also a sense of pride. The Arathan had called humans Deathworlders not as an insult but as a truth. They had seen what we were capable of. They had seen that Earth, despite its storms and struggles, was full of life that refused to give up. And maybe, just maybe, that was why they had chosen to come here. Because they believed that if anyone could stand against the darkness, it would be us. For days, the sky above Earth stayed silent. The Arathan ship floated high above the clouds, dark and still like a star that had suddenly lost its light. Every telescope pointed toward it. Every scientist worked around the clock, but there was no signal, no sound, no sign of life. People around the world couldn't stop watching the news. Everyone asked the same question: what happened to the Arathan? Were they still alive? Was their warning real? No one had answers. At night, when people looked up, the ship still glowed faintly, just enough to remind everyone it was still there. Some said it looked like it was sleeping. Others said it was waiting. Inside the space centers, the scientists tried sending hundreds of different messages. They used lights, sounds, even old Morse code, hoping the Arathan might reply. For a long time, there was nothing. Then one morning, a weak pulse appeared on the radar. It was slow and uneven, like a heartbeat struggling to continue. The signal repeated 3 times, then stopped. The world held its breath. The translation teams worked quickly to decode it. After hours of analysis, the message was simple but chilling. They are near. That was all. No one knew what it meant. But those 3 words spread like wildfire. Social media, news channels, and radio stations repeated them endlessly. People began to panic, thinking that whatever had destroyed the Arathan home was now coming toward Earth. Governments tried to calm everyone down, but fear had already taken hold. Meanwhile, in a quiet lab far from the big cities, a small team of scientists noticed something strange. Their deep space scanners showed tiny distortions, barely visible, but moving closer every hour. At first they thought it was just static, but soon the pattern became clear. It wasn't random. It was a movement. Something large was approaching Earth from deep space. When the data reached the world's major observatories, everything changed. The readings showed not one but many objects traveling at impossible speeds. They weren't natural asteroids. They were moving in formation. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone thought the same thing. Something was coming. As the hours passed, the Arathan ship suddenly came alive again. Its silver surface began to shine brighter, and strange symbols appeared across its hull. The entire ship started to hum with energy, as if it was waking up after a long sleep. Every monitoring station picked up the same signal, stronger this time, faster, almost desperate. "Hide your light," it said. "They follow the bright ones." It took a few seconds for the meaning to sink in. The Arathan were warning humanity to shut down signals, to turn off anything that could attract attention. Satellites, power grids, communication arrays, anything that glowed or transmitted energy could be seen from space. For the first time in history, Earth began to dim. Cities turned off unnecessary lights. Satellites went silent. Even the International Space Station powered down non-essential systems. The world that had always been so loud suddenly became quiet, and still the objects in space kept coming. But what surprised everyone most was what happened next. The Arathan ship slowly descended closer to Earth's orbit. People could see it now even during the day, a shining silver crescent cutting through the blue sky. It moved as if it was preparing for something big. Then came a new message. "We came to find peace," it said, "but peace never follows us. Your world is not ready for what comes, yet it might be the only one strong enough to stand." That message shook every listener. It wasn't just a warning, it was a kind of farewell. Within hours, the Arathan ship released several smaller crafts, glowing softly like falling stars. They scattered around the Earth's upper atmosphere and began forming a protective ring. Scientists studying the readings realized what they were doing. They were building a barrier, a shield of energy. The Arathan were protecting Earth. Every nation watched as those lights wrapped around the planet like a delicate net. The energy field shimmered faintly, invisible most of the time, but strong enough to distort signals and radar waves. It was beautiful and haunting at the same time. On the ground, people started feeling something strange, a quiet unity. For once, all countries, all people, were focused on the same thing. It didn't matter who you were or where you lived. Everyone was connected by the same fear and the same hope. Children asked their parents if the Sky Friends were okay. Some people sent messages of gratitude into space, hoping somehow the Arathan would hear them. Artists painted the glowing ship. Musicians wrote songs about it. In the middle of fear, humanity did what it always did best. It created hope. Days passed, and the strange objects from space drew closer. The energy readings from them grew stronger, but something unexpected happened. The Arathan shield began to react. It pulsed with blue light every time those readings increased, like it was absorbing or deflecting something invisible. The scientists monitoring the data couldn't believe what they were seeing. "They're defending us," one of them whispered. And they were right. The Arathan had placed themselves between Earth and whatever was coming. They didn't run away. They stood guard. On the 10th night after their warning, the entire planet saw it. A bright flash tore across the sky, followed by a wave of light that spread across the stars. The Arathan ship shone brighter than ever, its glow turning golden. People from every continent looked up, their faces illuminated by the light of something they couldn't explain. And then, silence again. The next morning, when telescopes searched the sky, the smaller crafts were gone. The shield had vanished. The Arathan ship was no longer there. It had disappeared without a trace. For hours, scientists checked every reading, every satellite feed, but there was nothing. It was as if the entire ship had dissolved into starlight. Some people believed they had destroyed whatever was chasing them. Others thought they had sacrificed themselves to protect Earth. A few believed they had simply left, continuing their endless journey. But deep down, most people felt the same thing. They didn't leave because they had to. They left because they wanted us to live. Over time, life slowly returned to normal. Lights came back on, satellites resumed their orbits, and cities began to glow again. But the world wasn't the same anymore. Humanity had changed. We had seen something greater than ourselves, beings who, even in their fear and exhaustion, had chosen to protect a world that wasn't theirs. The phrase Deathworlders of Earth became a new kind of symbol, not of fear but of resilience. Schools taught the story to children. Scientists built new technologies inspired by the fragments of data left behind by the Arathan shield. Artists painted murals of the silver ship glowing above a quiet blue planet. And every year, on the same night the Arathan vanished, people around the world turned off their lights for 1 hour. Not out of fear, but as a sign of respect. They called it the night of the signal. During that hour, the stars looked brighter than ever. Some nights, people claimed they could see a faint shimmer moving among the stars, almost like a whisper of light circling the Earth. Maybe it was just the atmosphere. Maybe it was something more, but for many, it was enough to believe that the Earthen still watched over them from far away, somewhere beyond the cold distance of space. The scientists who had once worked on Project Echo continued to study the last transmissions from the Earthen. Inside one of the final signals, buried deep in the data, they found something unexpected. A recording. It wasn't words. It was a sound, it was laughter. Soft, unfamiliar, but filled with life. It didn't belong to any human, yet it carried warmth and joy. The Earthen had learned to laugh. That discovery touched everyone who heard it. The beings who once didn't understand emotion had learned it from humanity. And in their final message, that was what they left behind. A reminder that even in the darkest universe, there could still be light and laughter. Years passed. Humanity continued to grow, explore, and build. The story of the Earthen became part of human history, a story about connection, courage, and sacrifice. But no one ever forgot the lesson they brought, that strength doesn't come from power or fear, but from the will to protect, to care, and to hope. And so whenever storms came, whenever the world seemed too hard to live in, people would look up at the stars and whisper the same words, "They are near." Not out of fear anymore, but as a promise. Because somewhere, beyond the silent darkness, the Earthen might still be watching, waiting for the Deathworlders of Earth to rise again, strong, stubborn, and full of hope. Years had passed since the Earthen ship disappeared from Earth's skies. The world had moved forward, rebuilding and growing stronger. Cities thrived, technology advanced, and people learned more about the universe than any generation before them. Yet, no one forgot the lessons brought by those mysterious visitors from beyond the stars. Every so often, scientists and astronomers would detect a faint pulse in the far reaches of space. Nothing big, nothing threatening. Just a reminder that someone, somewhere, was still out there watching, listening. It wasn't clear if it was a message, a beacon, or simply the echo of the Earthen's passing, but it gave people a sense of connection they had never felt before. Project Echo had become legendary. The scientists who once worked in secrecy were now seen as pioneers of humanity's first true contact with an alien species. Schools taught their story, and new generations grew up with the idea that the universe wasn't silent. It was alive with possibilities. Yet despite the advances in technology, the questions remained. Why had the Earthen come? What exactly had they been running from? Could the danger they spoke of still be out there? Humanity had been changed, yes, but the universe was still vast, still unknown, and still dangerous. One morning, a new signal appeared. It was faint, almost too weak to detect, but the trained eyes of astronomers noticed it immediately. Unlike the signals from years before, this one was not urgent or loud. It was calm, measured, deliberate. It carried a strange, melodic tone, like the music the Earthen had sent when they first began communicating. The message repeated itself in cycles. After careful decoding, the scientists realized it was not just sound, it was a story. The Earthen were sharing their journey, not with words, but with patterns of light and frequency that could be interpreted by human minds. The story told of survival, of loss, and of hope. The Earthen spoke of the darkness that had chased them, the devastation of their homeworld, and the courage it had taken to travel across the stars. But it also told of their wonder at finding Earth, of their relief in discovering a species capable of understanding, of responding, and of choosing to protect them. It was a story about connection, about how two species, separated by light years and impossible distances, had found trust and understanding in each other. People around the world listened to the story in awe. It wasn't a warning this time. It wasn't fear. It was gratitude. And in its way, it was a lesson. The Earthen revealed that when they had called Earth, they had not expected help to come from a world like ours. To them, Earth was a death world, a place of storms, harsh landscapes, and unpredictable life. Survival here required resilience, strength, and adaptability, traits the Earthen had never seen in any other species. They did not expect Deathworlders to answer. The message repeated. But now it was no longer a warning. It was a recognition, a compliment. Scientists began sharing the message with the public. It reminded people of something they often forgot, that humanity's greatest strength came from struggle. From living in a world that was sometimes unforgiving, humans had developed courage, empathy, and the ability to endure. That was why the Arathan had trusted Earth when no one else could. The Arathan also left guidance, subtle but profound. They taught humanity how to observe the universe differently, how to look at energy, how to detect patterns invisible to the naked eye, and how to understand communication that was not based on words or signals, but on shared understanding. Their lessons were like seeds, planting ideas that would grow over generations. In cities and towns, schools and homes, people began practicing these new ways of thinking. Children learned to notice small patterns in nature, to find beauty in randomness, and to understand that not all threats are obvious. They learned that connection could exist even across impossible distances. Meanwhile, governments began considering humanity's role in the greater universe. Could Earth become a protector, a guide, or a safe haven for other species that might be lost or in danger? Could the lessons from the Arathan be applied to ensure that humanity could endure and protect itself in a universe full of unknowns? These discussions were long and often difficult. Fear still existed. The universe, after all, was still vast and unpredictable. But the knowledge that another species had seen humanity's resilience and chosen to trust it changed perspectives. It reminded people that even in fear, hope could guide decisions. Years later, an unusual event brought the memory of the Arathan back vividly. A faint shimmer appeared in the night sky, visible to the naked eye. It wasn't large and it didn't move quickly. It hovered, glowing softly like a distant lantern. People who saw it felt a strange sense of calm, as though someone familiar was watching over them. The scientists confirmed it was not natural. It was a residual signal from the Arathan, a kind of echo left behind intentionally. They had gone, but their presence lingered in subtle ways, guiding humanity to observe, to think, and to act carefully. In the years that followed, humanity changed in small but significant ways. People began to take better care of the planet, not just for themselves but for future travelers who might one day arrive. Communities learned to cooperate, inspired by the lesson that survival often depends on trust and connection. Artists, musicians, and writers incorporated the story of the Arathan into their work, spreading the memory of their visit and the lesson it carried. In paintings and songs, in stories and sculptures, the Arathan's presence became a symbol of hope and resilience. One of the most remarkable changes was in how humans thought about life itself. For centuries, people had assumed Earth was the center of existence. Now they realized that life existed everywhere, sometimes fragile, sometimes strong, and always valuable. They understood that communication, empathy, and courage were not just human traits. They were universal. Even as decades passed, children grew up hearing the stories of the Arathan. They heard about the first signals, the music, the warnings, and the final sacrifice of protection. They learned that life was precious, fragile, and full of unknown dangers, but that hope and resilience could carry them through. And somewhere in the quiet of space, far beyond human reach, the Arathan continued their journey. Their messages became less frequent, almost like whispers on the wind. But the echoes remained, guiding humanity silently, like a distant hand reminding them that the universe was vast, unpredictable, and alive with possibility. One day, a young student asked a teacher, "Why did they choose us? Why not another world?" The teacher smiled and replied, "Because we survived when others could not. Because even when life is hard, we choose to protect, to care, to hope. That is why they called us Deathworlders. Not to scare us, but to show us that our strength can make a difference even to beings across the stars." And so humanity carried that lesson forward. Earth continued to grow, explore, and reach for the stars. People learned that survival was not just about technology or power, but about connection, courage, and compassion. The Arathan had shown them the way. They had trusted a world that no one else would, and in doing so had taught humanity something far greater than fear or war. They had shown the value of resilience, hope, and the quiet strength that comes from simply choosing to endure and protect what matters most. The last message humanity received from the Arathan was simple. It appeared in fragments spread across the fading signals of deep space. Remember, trust, endure, hope, and then silence. Yet the message was never truly gone. It lived in every person who looked up at the stars, in every hand that reached to help another, and in every mind that wondered what life could be beyond their own world. Earth had become more than just a planet. It had become a symbol, a lesson, and a beacon. Humanity had learned that even in a death world, strength and hope could shine brighter than any star, and somewhere, far beyond the limits of human vision, the Arathan watched, smiling quietly, knowing that their faith had not been misplaced, because Earth had answered, because humanity had chosen to rise, because life, no matter how fragile, could always find a way. The universe had spoken, and for the first time Earth had truly listened.